Hey everyone, welcome to Console Corner. Once again, my name is Blue and I am your host. On today's show, we will be talking about a lot of the things going on in week 2 of the PCL, the PML, the PPL as well. Virtus Pro goes 8-0 this week. Envy, a little bit of a shake-up in week 3. And Nemesis with some big news, as well as Onslaught. Firery Impact playing a huge part of Hydra's success so far. And we have some other stories coming your way. But first, breaking news coming out of PS4 North American Division for PCL. Breaking news, Nemesis, after starting 0-2 in Phase 2 of the PCL, in the PS4 North American region, is in last place behind Hydra, who is in first after they 3-0 versus Nemesis. Leaves them at that 0-2 mark. SJP did not play in week 2. Instead, they used Hilltime, who we haven't seen since his HRX debut with Onslaught, who were 3-0'd by Vexed at the time. Now, Nemesis's entire roster has left. They have all departed. Dayton Too Cool has been handed the captain role. For those of you who don't know, he was actually the captain and the leading man for the Hydra Gaming team through relegations until that roster completely changed, with some members from Big Money and Low Key Scheming combining forces, where they are now 2-0 in the PCL. But Dayton Too Cool does take control of the Nemesis team. He is looking for players. Of the players who have left, you have Hilltime, who's gone. SJP, who is gone. You have Richie, who was among the top in the DPS stats for all DPS players across the console league for Phase 2, despite his 0-2 start league-wide. It's sad news that SJP is gone. He's a 2-time world champion. He was hit with that huge suspension in Phase 1, which hindered him from not being able to play through that the entirety of that phase. Wasn't able to join Nemesis at LAN versus Penta, although don't know if that would have made a difference, considering not only because it's console versus PC, but hey, it was Penta. The Penta that won. The Penta that beat Navi. The Penta that beat NIP. So, among that, we also have Jeff the Raccoon, who is a top 5 MVP candidate throughout the entire Phase 1 and still to right now, as of now, he's still in that top 5. Although we suspect him to fall because he won't be playing. And that's a huge blow to him and to the league's integrity of players. Flame Effects obviously will no longer be playing on the team. From what we know, we think he might go back to PC. Will he be able to find a spot on a PML roster? Who knows? He is able to make that switch. But one of the interesting things that I wanted to talk about in this roster shakeup is what's next for PS4 NA. So pretty much Onslaught and Hydra lead the pack now. Phase 1, it was Nemesis versus Onslaught for that first place position. And Low Key Scheming and Big Money were fighting for that 3rd place position. And I thought that was going to be the case this time, with Hydra taking the spot of Big Money and Stremix taking the spot of Low Key Scheming, and those two going at it, or vice versa, whatever it may be. Onslaught and Nemesis going at it for that 1st place position again. But Nemesis 0-2 in 4th place. Stremix is 0-2 as well. They're in 3rd, though. Not as big of a map differential, considering they did take 2 maps, one in week 1 and 1 in week 3, but huge differences there. Onslaught in 2nd place, they're 2-0. Hydra 2-0 as well, but they didn't drop as many maps as Onslaught. But they will face each other in week 3, so that could determine which of them will solidify themselves as 1st place contenders for the time being. But let's talk about Whoosh. Whoosh puts out a tweet, says he is a free agent, and he's willing to be a sub. This is the important thing right here, because I think the best case scenario for Whoosh, locked to PS4, he's locked to the North American division, so he can't really go anywhere. Does Hydra need him? Well, let's be honest. Any team in this league or any team in this division needs Whoosh. He's a great player. He's been to countless lands, 5 of the 6 to be exact. And overall, he brings a dynamic, brings a sort of veteranship to a team that he attends. So, would he be a good fit for Hydra Gaming? No. I think that they're okay with Izzy Tyler on that main tank. I think Business has been doing great on the off tank. He's not trying to flex those DPS champs like he has in the past. He's not trying to play main tank as much. He's playing those off tanks. He's playing that Khan. He's playing those Makoas. And he's doing fairly well at it. And it just goes to show that him and Izzy on the 1-2 combo provided them to be in first place so far. Now, can Stremix use him? I think there may be a communication problem there. Stremix is mainly a Hispanic or a LatAm team, so they may not speak English on their comms. Who knows? I don't. You can let me know in the comments below if that's true. I know Stremix is trying to figure some things out. I think that they swapped out Solaire, brought in Cool Enzi. I think Enzi is an okay-ish player. I don't think he's better than Solaire. I think Erados is the problem when it comes to their DPS. I think that Solaire needs to be slotted back into the lineup. The only problem with Enzi and Solaire playing is that they would have to swap back and forth between that hit scan and blaster. They both play blasters pretty well. And they both play okay-ish on the hit scans. I've seen Solaire play Victor and Vivian, but only in a ranked setting, not really in the PCL or competitive setting. So that would be interesting to see if he's able to play those at that level. Enzi did play the Leon in week 2 for Stremix. He did okay-ish on it. I wouldn't say it was something to shake an eye at or take a second glance at. I think if they do want to take a hit scan, they want to keep Enzi in there on the blasters, or you bring Solaire back on the blasters. I think the best case scenario would bring in Yato Acosto. We know we saw Yato play in the PCL in phase 1 for low-key scheming, but he was sort of playing that DPS flex role, which is kind of where the blaster goes. He was playing these binary genos. He was playing a lot of weird things, and he didn't really do well. He didn't really mesh with that lineup at the time with what they were trying to do with him. Whoa. So that'll be interesting to see if they're able to bring Solaire back, if they're able to bring Yato Acosto into the lineup. But getting back to the main topic here, Whoosh, I think, would be a good fit for Onslaught. I know there was sort of a rivalry between Nemesis and Onslaught during the phase 1 competition. I don't know if that's still there. I don't know if Whoosh can set that aside. I don't know if Onslaught can set that aside. For the longest time, I've been saying Onslaught has a frontline problem. Swarmso playing the off tanks, most notably Makoa, there's some struggle there, or there has been. He's been playing it a little bit better as of recently, but if you bring Whoosh in, I think that would be a big plus to that. Now, here's what I would propose. Whoosh says that he's all right with being a substitute, and I think that a lot of teams really don't utilize the sub to the biggest advantage that they could. I think bringing in Whoosh as a sub for certain drafts or certain maps could be a big plus for them. I think if they want to run a Makoa or they want to run some of these tanks that Whoosh can play better than Onishi or Swarm, so I think that would be a smart decision to maybe slot him in, sub one of them out. He can play the main tank if Onishi can't play that main tank as well. He can play that off tank if Swarm can't play that off tank as well. So they can use these 3 players and kind of bounce back and forth and kind of keep their opponents on their toes, saying, oh my goodness, they're drafting this, or they sub this guy in, so what can their draft look like this time? I think it'll add a new dynamic to them. I think they would be the first team to actually utilize a sub at its highest potential if they were able to do that. And I think it would be a good fit for them. Plus, it would give Onslaught a better chance at securing first place more dominantly in the division. I think it would also allow Whoosh to continue his success and continue his journey to making more lands. So that's what I think about that. The rest of the roster leaving, sad news. I hate to see SJP leave. I think he's a great player. I hate to see Jeff leave. I know he's been grinding for a long time. He's had a lot of success, but he kind of gets hit with the short end of the stick most of the time. And I'm really sad for Richie as well. He was doing so well. Despite starting 0-2, he was still putting up huge numbers. He was looking like LeBron from a tweet that I saw. So sad news. Up next, let's talk about Fiery Impact here. Fiery Impact was a part of Onslaught. Did pretty well with them towards the end of phase 1. And from what I've heard, he has left Onslaught on his own accord. It was his decision to leave, and that's all right. The problem with that is that there's a little bit of confusion. There's some people saying Onslaught are not allowing Firery to play versus them for Hydra. And there's some people that say that's not allowed. But here's the thing. From what I've been told, from what I've heard, what I've seen, and what people have been telling me, is that Fiery Impact left on his own decision, and he made a mutual agreement. I don't know if there was a contract signed for this. I know that he is signed to a contract with Onslaught. So they allowed him to leave on his own decision if and only if he agreed to not play versus Onslaught during the season or during the entire phase 2. So that would be 4 weeks that Firery wouldn't be able to play versus Onslaught with whatever team he joined. Just so happened to be Hydra Gaming. Now, is this allowed? There's a fine gray line between this. Yes, it is allowed because in the rules, it says if a player is cut and there are obligations or buyout clauses or such that prevent this player from playing from another team in the PCL, that org has to let those go. They have to just release that. That's if they cut the player. Now, they didn't cut him, from what I've been told. What I'm hearing is that Firery left on his own decision. So since he wasn't cut, he's still contractually obligated to Onslaught, which means that, you know, if they allow him to play for another team and they didn't cut him, he kind of has to honor that mutual agreement, whether it was a contract or not. And here's why. Because if they don't, then Onslaught could play the card where, you know, they say, hey, this guy, he's still on our team. Hydra hasn't, you know, done the buyout clause. Now, remember, I don't know if there's a buyout clause for Firery. I haven't seen the contract between him and Onslaught. But if there is, you know, they could say, Onslaught could say, hey, Hydra took our player. We did not cut him. We did not drop him. He's played week 1 and week 2 with them against our contract that we have with him, you know, blah, 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 whatever it may be. And what happens is that Hydra would have to forfeit weeks 1 and week 2's victories, which could potentially put Nemesis at 1-1. It could put Stremix at 1-1. It could be a big mess, both legally and internally for the admins, for the orgs, Onslaught and Hydra, for the players as well. So if he does have a buyout clause and you have made this this mutual agreement, I believe that you should not play. That way you don't create this whole mess. Now, if there is no buyout clause and you didn't leave on your own accord and you were cut or dropped by Onslaught or the team, then yes, you're able to play because all of that is waived. It's in the PCL rules. They must do it. The orgs must obey to the rules of the PCL because they have also signed those agreements with the terms and conditions. So it's a big mess, and it'll have a big impact on the match, regardless of which way it goes. And just you guys people got to be careful with the agreements that they make, the contracts that they sign, and you have to understand that, hey, I don't want to play for this team anymore, but I'm still contracted through this team. I either have to have someone, you know, purchase this buyout clause, or I have to find a way out of this team legally because I'm signed to a contract. You have to remember that. So that's one of the dangers of signing a contract to an org, saying, oh, yeah, I'm going to sign this contract with this org. That's great. But next phase, I want to play with my friends. And that may not work out for the best. Up next, let's talk about Cyclone for a moment. They regained Slopodopoulos, who did play for All Business in the PML week 1. He was playing main tank. Wasn't really working out well for him. He didn't want to play it. He didn't look comfortable on it. All Business decided to cut him from the roster. He wants to play DPS. So he came back to Cyclone in the PCL for week 2, where it was a gruesome 5-game set versus the French team in Vroumin. Vroumin actually was able. The first game went Cyclone's way. It was a 4-0 on Jag Falls. Pretty dominant display from them. After that, they kind of fell off their totem, their pedestal, so to speak. Game 2 went in favor of Vroumin. Game 3 went in favor of Vroumin. Game 4 went in favor of Cyclone. That was still a hard battle from Vroumin though. And then Vroumin was able to take Game 5. And it was a long, gruesome match. And it was intense. And I just think that Slop is not the same Slopadopoulos that we've seen in Phase 1. He's trying to balance between controller and PC. He's trying to play for PC teams. And, joining back to Cyclone was like, hey, I got dropped in PML, but, I can play for you guys for the time being until I find another position. And we'll get into that a little bit later because he did in the PML. But it's just, Slop's not looking the same. Cyclone's not looking the same. They're having a little bit of roster problems. Welsh Mania is very proactive on Twitter along with some other players, but most notably Welsh. He's upset with the roster rules. I think it's good for the league. I know it hurts teams right now, but for the longevity, it helps. It also would, potentially increase the player base, knowing that, hey, I'm this tier 3 or tier 2 player. I'm looking to get into competitive esports, and I'm not just going to come in and get mollywopped by the same 5 guys, no matter what division I play in or things like that. I understand it's tough. Another thing I want to note is Valerian. Ninja Zen and Naiju, no shortcoming to them. They are doing great together. They're back on their 1-2 punch of the tank duos. Naiju's not trying to flex to things that he shouldn't be. He's kind of in the same seat as Business from Hydra, if I were to say. Very good on the off tanks, both of them. But when they try to main tank or they try to play DPS or basically play anything other than off tanks, they just don't do well. It hurts to watch them try those things. But they're both doing the same thing, sticking to their off tanks and playing them fairly well. Ninja Zen's back on his main tanks. His fingers are no longer broken, so that's a big plus for him. But I want to point out Valerian. He's doing great. He's actually tied in the league for most kills right now for Phase 2 with 91. That's an impressive feat, although he has played 9 games so far, I believe. So that's about 10 kills per game, roughly. But he's playing very well. And it's awesome to see Valerian in this stage, right, or in this position right now, because he's always tried to make the PPL. Unfortunate events in Phase 1's qualifiers where Ninja Zen broke his fingers. They weren't able to make it. I think that he doesn't have the best cast around him, but he has a very good cast at this moment. And I think Valerian is showing that he is a very strong hit scan player in the PCL overall, not just Xbox EU. I think that he's showing that he could be someone that develops into a top player, maybe even be considered by a top team later down the line, maybe in 2020. So he's looking really good, and I really enjoy watching him play right now. So speaking about Slopadopoulos, he was playing for All Business in Week 1. He played for Cyclone in the PCL in Week 2. Now it has been revealed that he has joined another PML team, this time in Penta Esports. He's joining as a DPS, so he'll be able to play something he wants to play. Now, who he's replacing, I haven't been told. I haven't even checked my own rosters to make sure, because PML is kind of shifting around at a faster rate than PCL used to. Or was. So it's kind of confusing to catch the PML action right now. I think everyone in the league is trying to figure things out at this moment. I think Sour pretty much has things figured out because they're in first. They're dominating everyone in their division. Besides One Trick Pony, I think they took them to Game 5, but they were, One Trick Pony has some raw talent. I think other than that, All Business is still trying to make some roster adjustments and work for some chemistry and strategies, drafts. And I think Penta needs a lot of help right now. I think Penta starts off 0-2. They get 3-0'd in both of those sets as well, versus Sour team in Week 1, versus All Business in Week 2. So that was very surprising to me that they got beaten. Not that they got beaten, but that they got beaten so convincingly especially versus All Business after they made a substitution or after they made a roster change when they dropped Slop a week before. So that was huge for me. I think Ovum really needs to step up and whip this roster into shape. I don't think that anyone else on the team is in the position to do so, and I think that Ovum needs to be the one to do it. With Slop joining, could add a new dynamic to their drafts. He's still roughly not as prominent on the PC as he is in the PCL past. So waiting to see what he can do in the PML with a team like Penta already being down 0-2 in the 12-week season. So if you blinked, you probably missed it, but Onslaught Game 1 did see a substitution in Week 2 versus Stremix. Dovakin, also known as I'm Calamity on the PS4 side of things, who was seen playing for Onslaught in Week 1 of Phase 1 and then finished the rest of the Nemesis squad, or the rest of the phase with the Nemesis squad. He subbed Game 1 for Ghost, and he looked pretty good. But the question is, where is he now? I think Onslaught could use him. I think that if you have Swarm or Onishi on that main tank, I think that the off tank should be Calamity or Dovakin, whatever you want to call him in this instance. But I think he was very good. He brought a good dynamic to both Onslaught and Nemesis last phase. He played Torvald pretty well. He played the Ashe pretty well. And he went undefeated on Ruckus again. So I think that with these offensive tanks, I think that Dovakin can bring a big part to someone's team. I think if he were to join anyone else other than Onslaught, if he were to join Onslaught, it would be unlike the Whoosh thing where that's kind of a sub and mix it up kind of thing. He would be a permanent player in that lineup for either Onishi or Swarm, whichever one they would want to go with. I think if he were to join any other team in PS4 and A, it would have to be possibly Nemesis. I think that if Whoosh and Dovakin come back to Nemesis, they would be able to start something. They'd have those two on the front lines, with Dovakin being that flex one off tank. You would have Dayton on that DPS role. You could bring in a Jeff as the healer, and that's pretty much building the old team again. But I think that and then you bring in Richie as well. Dayton could play those blasters potentially. You could have Richie play them as well. I think that could be something that could work out. I think if Dayton just goes out and gets people other than them or other than these top players that have departed already, I don't think they'll be able to find a roster contend for. But they did go 3-0 as zero tolerance before they signed with Hydra under Dayton, so maybe he can gather those people, try and do something. So let's talk about some wasted time this week, and that comes from wasted potential. So Bandmade was given the captain role because Jehovos, Pronto, Pow, Shala, G-Pan, they all said, hey, we don't want to play. We have scheduling issues or, whatever it may be. So Bandmade was almost in this retaliation repeat mode here for Phase 2 in the Xbox NA division. And he kind of was looking for some players. And he told me, hey, I found some players. I was getting ready to submit this roster. And then, Jehovos and all of them came back and said, hey, we want to play actually. So they kind of reneged on their decision initially. But they will be going in with pretty much the same roster, except for they will have one different player, and that's Person of Uranus. He actually had his region lock lifted, and it shouldn't have been there in the first place. Once PCL Phase 2 started, reason being is because he's never played in the PCL, neither Phase 1 or Phase 2. But he did play in relegations, and Xbox EU was locked to that for that little stint, and I think that him being able to play an Xbox NA, he will be playing off tank, unfortunately, not what we're used to seeing him play. But I think that's a good pickup. Brings some knowledge, some game sense. He's been hanging around with all of the top players on console, so maybe he can bring some of that knowledge into these players that don't really get the opportunity to play with those top players in tens and casuals. Be a part of that collective. I think that would be good. Next up, we have Hype Unit returning as they sign with the Shadows. So Shadows no more, or coming out from the Shadows. I shall say. That's the PML North American team that is in first place right now. I think that they are struggling, but they're not struggling at the same time. It's very weird. I think that they're not struggling to win games versus other teams. I think that they're struggling to win games because of their own drafting and success within themselves. They went 5 games with Sanguine, but that was a reverse sweep, so that leaned a little more towards they were the better team there. They were able to adjust throughout the set. They did go 5 games versus Exile, and that was kind of surprising. But then again, not as surprising after you think about this, that Exile, they looked really bad in week 1 because they had 3 support players in their lineup. And now that they have what they possibly could have as their final lineup, they look better in week 2. They don't have 3 support players anymore. Aspect's playing that support instead of flexing to this DPS and all of that. So they've brought in some other players. They have, I don't know if it's Amost, Almost, or Imost, or Amost. I don't know. But he kind of impressed me. He had some good plays, especially on the Mave on Bazaar. Another good thing about that Bazaar map was Dethroner. He played the Inara very, very well. His cooldown management and his abilities, when to use them, how to use them, who to use them against, and how to stall out the point, how to capture that point. Those were beautiful. I think that he is finally able to show off some of the things that he learned in the PPL from those other better players, because it's not as fast paced. He can kind of slow it down. The PPL might bring a lot of pressure saying, hey, we're the best in the world, we're going up against the best in the world. We have to win a world championship. We need to win these games now. I think with the PML, it's a little bit more relaxed. It's like, hey, only 1 team I think is making land, maybe 2, whatever. There's only 4 to deal with, though, 4 total teams. So I think he could be a little bit more relaxed. So I think that he's able to show off some of those things he learned in the PPL at a much better rate, and kind of work on himself as a player. And I really like that. Liked watching Dethroner play these first 2 weeks here in the PML. Another thing about Hype Unit is Edgem. I think Edgem looks good on paper, but to me he looks uncomfortable right now. It's not that he's uncomfortable playing the game. It's not that he's uncomfortable playing in this lineup or anything like that. I just think that it's a new environment for him, new players. You have Dethroner coming from the PPL. You have some other new players, so kind of a change of scenery. Maybe he's still working on bonding with the team and building some chemistry. Maybe the drafts are a little wonky, things like that. He admitted on Twitter in week 1 he didn't play so well. I think he did okay. In week 2, kind of the same. I think that the rest of his team is kind of uplifting him. He still looks good on paper stat-wise and all of that. But I think that he kind of looks, to me, a little bit uncomfortable, but I think that he'll be able to iron those wrinkles out and be able to play much better and get back to that dominant hits game. Moving on, we have Envy. So first of all, Virtus Pro goes 8-0 this week in week 3 of the PP. In week 2, they didn't do so hot, but they beat Envy 4-0 and they beat NIP 4-0, I believe. And Envy beat NIP 4-2. So NIP falling off in the power rankings a little bit because of that. But they did win 1 game versus the Renegades, as well as Virtus Pro beating the Renegades, and Envy losing to Virtus Pro. So Envy, I think, is playing this perfectly. I think this is a smart move. I don't know if they, obviously, winning all of their games is ideal. But if you win versus the top teams that are above you, I think that's better than winning versus the bottom team. The reason being is because if you beat that top team, you get closer to them in the standings. And so, that could be said for Virtus Pro beating Envy, yes. But there's a lot of other teams that Virtus Pro cannot beat. Those being the teams that Envy can beat. I like to think of it like this. I was a Cleveland Cavaliers fan. Or actually, here's a better example. Golden State Warriors, when they were on the impressive winning streak a few years ago, they lost. And who did they lose to at the time? The Milwaukee Bucks, who at that time were not very good. But it's better to lose to that bad team because going up against the good teams, you'll eventually have to face them in need to win situations, and you want to be able to say we can beat them as confidently as you can. And I think that goes to say with here. So if Envy beats Virtus Pro, that's cool. That sets them apart a little bit further away. But that's not as important as winning those games against NIP, against Navi, against SSG, against those teams. So I think Envy's okay losing this game. Maybe not losing 4-0. I think maybe taking a couple maps would help them in the plus and minus. But hey, Virtus Pro played a great set, so kudos to them. They did beat NIP, both of them, and that was impressive. NIP kind of struggling against VP. The drafts for VP were pretty dominant. I think that was what it was, especially for the maps that they played. And last but not least for the PPL, I think Renegades. Remember we talked, Kresnik said there's that honeymoon phase for all teams when they make roster adjustments. And a lot of people said, oh, Renegades didn't make any roster adjustments. And I said, well, they did. They dropped their coach. That's part of their roster. That's someone who comes in, makes decisions, helps with drafting, feeds input on games and VODs and all of that stuff. So he is part of the roster, or they are part of the roster. So they went 2-0, and they played very well after that. I think that honeymoon phase is kind of stopped now. I think they've hit that, hey, calm down wall, so to speak. They go 0-4 versus Virtus Pro and NIP. Pretty rough for the Renegades. Hopefully they can bounce back. Yeah. So real quick, just wanted to add this in here since Console Corner does cover a lot of things. The PS4 Call of Duty Amateur League, brought to you by the National Amateur League. You can follow them on Twitter at National AML. They will be actually holding the first ever Black Ops 4 draft. That actually is probably the only first ever draft for any Call of Duty league. They had 3 days of combine. A bunch of players signed up for the draft, had to meet the eligibility requirements. Then they were placed on random teams throughout the entire combine, and they would play these games on stream in the combine for orgs to scout and look at the players. They would see stats and all of that. But Saturday, August 10th, I believe it is. Yes, August 10th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on National Amateur League, or National AML Alpha, I believe the Twitch channel is. You can drop by my Twitter at RealBlueTV with no E in blue, sure. And we'll retweet it on the ConsoleProNews channel as well. But I'm actually hosting that draft, so it'll be fun to watch and see where players end up and what orgs take what and what is prioritized, and then look for some good games to come out of that throughout the league play. So that'd be awesome. For those of you looking for any Pro-Am, CWL Pro or CWL AM team information and stuff like that, you guys can check out IHOLDSHIFT. He has all the stuff you need to know for the World Championship coming up. We'll put his link to his YouTube in the description below. He's not a part of the ConsoleProNews team or the Console Corner team. I've been trying to get him to do the Call of Duty for us, but he has interviews with like all 32 teams or something like that, I believe, and he has all these videos, these breakdowns of the pools and his predictions and all of that stuff for both the CWL Pro teams. There's 16 of those, and the 16 CWL AM team. So check him out if you. So let's talk about Week 4 must-see matches for the PCL, PPL, and PML. So for the PPL, we're gonna have to go with Envy. Pretty much. They have 2 big matches coming up this week versus Space Station Gaming and Renegades. Where is Envy right now? Are they going to pull that again where they lose the Renegades but beat SSG? Are they able to dominate both these teams? SSG versus Envy is always a very good matchup to watch because it's kind of a battle of the wits. Although Kresnik no longer coaching SSG might put them at a disadvantage, but they are still a great team. So those should be awesome matches. And as always, they say a rematch of the World Championship, although they've rematched like 50 times, but since then. Anyways, that'll be a good one to watch. See if Renegades can bounce back. They go 2-0, then they go 0-2. Can they bounce back? Get a win against a top team like Envy. For PML, I think it's Sour Team versus All Business. All Business made a roster change, and they 3-0'd Penta. Are they able to contend with Sour Team like One Trick Pony was, or can they falter like Penta did versus Sour Team? So that'll be interesting to watch. For the PCL, it's obviously going to be Onslaught versus Hydra in the PS4 NA division. Can Hydra maintain their spot in first place and upset Onslaught? Can Onslaught finally take what's theirs, and that's first place in PS4 NA? And will Firery Impact play? That's the big thing coming up. So that about wraps it up here at Console Corner, or Console Pro News, brought to you by Console Corner. This has been another episode brought to you by me, Blue. No Smite information for this episode, but we will get that info to you as quickly as possible. Don't forget to check out the website at consolecorner.co. You can follow me on Twitter at RealBlueTV with no E in blue, and you can follow all of us on Twitter at ConsoleProNews. All the links for all of this will be in the description below. Any other news or info, or if you want to talk to us or share any of your thoughts, be sure to drop them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and join our Discord if you want. But you should. Keep grinding, everyone.